Hello, everyone. I am Judith Miller-Cruickshank, Vice President of Professional Development at the Project Management Institute of the Southern Caribbean Chapter, also known as PMI-SEC. What is PMI-SEC? PMI-SEC is a chapter of the international body Project Management Institute that basically connects over 700,000 project managers across the globe. At PMI SEC, we are just a mere thousand. However, we are mighty. Today, our podcast entitled Project Voices looks at Caribbean perspectives on project leadership. And what we're looking to do here is look at a different format. We've normally done and reached out to our membership via webinars, our suit coach membership program, our lunch and learn segments, but we looked at a gap. We saw a gap and we needed to fill this. That means we wanted to be able to reach our members where they are, on the way to a meeting, on the way to a site, somewhat of a plug and play aspect. So we have developed this podcast, which is the first of its kind within the region. And no better way to do this than to initiate this with our guest, Mr. Mikey Thackoor. Mr. Mikey Thackoor is a PMP professional. He is also the CEO of Zero Gravity. He is a senior program management professional and also has mentored quite a few persons under his belt in leadership positions as well. Mikey brings to the table 3 decades of project management. When I say project management expertise, he is the author, a published author of Begin at the End, his seminal work. And let me, at this point in time, introduce you to our initial guest, our pilot episode, Mr. Mikey Thackoor. Mikey, could you tell us a little bit more of yourself? I don't think I must have said enough.
Oh, Judith, that's a lot of praise there, and I appreciate you having me on this first podcast, which I think is very important, like you've touched on. So I'm very honored to be part of this, and I do hope that the people that are going to be listening to this take away as much as I'm going to give in this session. And I do appreciate your efforts, Judith. It must be said, for taking the time. I know this is a volunteership for putting this together. I know it's going to be immensely important to the people around and people hearing, and it's going to go a long way for bringing and raising the bar of project management and leadership in the Caribbean.
That's correct. That's very true, Mikey. That's very true.
And that's the reason we do this. We do this not so much for ourselves, but to make sure that we are raising the bar and leading the way and helping those behind us to get faster to where we are right now. And took us, so we're really leveraging our experience to make sure that people are benefiting, And like you said, not much more to add to that. Thank you for that introduction. I've been in construction my entire career, my entire life. I started up, in the field. I didn't get to where I'm at by, getting his hands dirty. So it's being a laborer, carpenter, mason, coming through the ranks. Been exposed to a lot of environments. I've worked through the spectrum of construction, you might say, from quality control, quality assurance, project management, QSing, quantities, leading, managing, and a myriad of projects scattered through the globe, US, in the Caribbean, Africa, doing works from deep foundation work to finishing buildings. So it goes from working on nuclear power plants, dams, bridges, and then moving to doing commercial work for government and for private sector, building regional emergency shelters, police stations, schools, so hotels. So a lot of experience in there. And of course, a lot of mistakes made, a lot of learning and maturity to get to where I'm at right now.
Wow.
There was no single book, but it's what you hear from me is that road I traveled and the experiences I have, which are real, which I hope that can help other persons when they get there to understand what the direction is and where to go.
Well, I believe you are the best guests that would be able to take our initial theme of our pilot episode, which is clarity over control, where we're looking at leading when the plan meets when the plan meets reality more so. Um, I want to get a feel for that. What do you actually mean about where the plan meets reality? And is control a bad thing? Is that bad?
No, so control is needed. If you have no control, we'll be in trouble. People do what they want and things go all right. So
Mm-hmm.
what we want to explore and what we want to talk about is, strong project leadership is not about controlling every step. There is controls required, but it's not about controlling every step. It's about making the outcome so clear that people can think, act, and adapt when the reality shifts on the ground. It's project environments in the Caribbean, whether you're doing construction or if you work in the office, there are challenges all the time. There are changing conditions. The goalpost changes. What do? You have logistics problems. You have incomplete information. That's normal for us. It's normal almost. It's not accepted, but it's a normal. Excessive control tends to slow progress. It kills initiative and it weakens trust. That's a fact. So we want to discuss, to focus on the leaders, how to define the destination clearly, protect the non-negotiables. This is the requirements, what has to happen, and give the teams enough clarity to understand the end without being micromanaged to deliver. So yes, controls are important, but controls are a tool and should be used as a tool.
Oh, you said something just now that was so very poignant, understanding the end. But as we project managers, we know that understanding the end may look at more like client satisfaction, ensuring that they are satisfied with the end product. Is that always the desired effect? Is that something that we should always strive for, you think?
Yes, we should, because at the end of the day, we as constructors and builders, we are building for someone else, the end
Mm-hmm.
user,
Mm-hmm.
which is usually the client. So yeah, their views are very important, but understand that the client may not be aware of all the nuances of construction. They're going to see a concrete
Mm.
column, not understand there's rebar, the strength of concrete. So you have to guide that expectation. Understand we have codes to follow. You have these ASTMs. You have NFPA, you have these codes that have to go into place to protect the end user, which they may not be aware. So yes, the end user, what we call the voice of the customer, is very important and trumps everything else that's going on, because ultimately you are constructing or building or producing a product for that person. It doesn't make sense. You've done a great job to meet the project specifications and the project contract, and when it gets to the client, they're like, "Nah, it doesn't work for me." Then you have what you're going to have is successful operation,
Mm-hmm.
patient debt.
Oh, could you elaborate a little bit more on that for me? Or has there actually been an instance where this has happened in the real world for you? Don't call any names. Mikey, don't call any
Right.
names.
Sure. So that's a reality all the time. That we sometimes, in the fog of war in construction and doing what we gotta do, we forget the voice of the customer. And we think, we gotta get this done, we have to get this done, and we don't involve them enough to understand what they need. An example would be as simple as a door swing. If you're not paying attention, it may be swinging and it's going to cause a disruption to the person using the building at the end or using the
Mm.
facilities, because you as a constructor are not paying attention to who's using it. So as simple as a door swing might be in the way and cause problems. Simple as that.
That is very, very, very interesting. So how was it rectified?
So you have to have engagement, PMI, ICC, and the PIMBOK. You must have tailoring and you must involve stakeholders early in the game and understand that when the client paints the outcome they're looking for,
Right.
and then you, with the real world knowledge, tell them this is what's going to be. There must be a marriage, and we must both have the same expectation. Which is why you have drawings, you have pictures, you have brochures. You build a mock-up room, and that's what we do in hotels, right? We build a mock-up room so that all the drawings are there, but nothing beats going there, see, smell, and touch to make sure we are all aligned on the end, which is so important. So before you build a $500 million hotel, you would build a mock-up room simply because that concept of clarity at the end beats control of any process.
That is so true. But one of the things I wanted to ask, what does a leader look like? A leader who is able to manage and control versus someone who pivots and perhaps scurries away. What does that, in your opinion, look like?
No, it depends on what we're doing and what we're having, and the team you have working around you. Because again, it has to be tailored, right? Um, when you have a worker on a site who knows what success looks like and feels trusted and knows that you trust that person to get there, he owns the mission. He then takes it more than you. He's more tenacious, he's more careful, and he pays attention because he shares your goal. So a leader has to share that goal with the team, not just keep it hide away and say, well, I'm the boss and this is what it's going to be. No, share that end with them. And that's what good has to be, is to share that deep ownership of the project. It's not just yours, because they have as much a part and as much pride in that project as you. And if they feel left out, as we say, they have no dog in the fight. Then they just check in. It's for them. It's just coming in, clocking a card, and clocking out. And those are not what you want. You really want people to buy into that. So a good leader taps into that, understands their team, and strong leadership is being bold, but it's not about being blind.
I
For
love
sure.
that. I love that what you just said. Being bold, but not being necessarily blind. So then
Yep.
necessarily a strong leader would be able to recognize when their team needs them the most and when their team is basically wavering at a point of uncertainty. What would you say would be one of the exceptional attributes of that leader?
Is will be to always, we have a habit, right? As because we're the leader, we're the one with the most experience most of the time. We have the all the letters behind our name, and that comes along. And you have to understand that the people around you may not be that, may not understand that, may not understand what you're trying to say. So communicating is very important to them. Understanding and saying what you think in your head to them is very important. Teams perform better when they know what success looks like. Teams perform better when the clarity is given, when their standards and decision boundaries are understanding where that boundaries lay with them. So if, for instance, you're managing a team, you're there and you understand, and just by the questions you're getting back from
Mhm.
when you know where they are. You know, as a project manager, I say to my people around me, is that please listen to understand, not to respond. And that's a nuance that sometimes we forget to understand as a leader. You really listen to what they're saying and only ask the question to clarify what you're trying to understand, and then respond. And when you take that time, you get a real pulse of what's going on your team.
So earlier on, you mentioned that you worked in several different projects, both nationally and internationally. I want to look somewhere within the region and I want to focus more in the Caribbean. What have you seen in terms of a project under pressure, and how does leadership look with projects under pressure in the Caribbean? Because it's
So,
totally
yeah.
different in our region. You would agree?
Yes. I say to my guys all the time, as a leader in Trinidad, we say, you can't hold water in your hand, can you? It's going to fall
No,
through.
you cannot.
So stop trying to control every step, every action, every process, every single time. Let some stuff go. You know, if you have a very tight hold on stuff is going to move slower. There'll be bottlenecks. There will be rework. There'll be frustration. There'll be delays because everybody's now waiting for you to decide and act, because you are taking that leadership role where you're the only one knows the end, and that works against you. So you really need for people to understand, lead like a finisher. So the outcome is in plain language. What needs to get done, what it looks like, and what cannot fail. Give the team the room to solve that problem, and you can go find another problem or another issue and deal with that there. Don't micromanage, and and reward the judgment they make when they make a decision, good, bad, or indifferent. Reward them and say, "Hey, yeah, good job. It was bad. What went wrong? Understand the logic, understand the thinking, and
Mhm,
correct. And let's be clear on the destination. Be clear on the destination. Be firm on standards.
mhm,
Be relentless on the finish line, and let the process breathe so people can think."
mm. So micromanagement would be something that is very it's unique to the Caribbean. I mean, I want to get a feel for, or rather through your lens, because you've had a vast amount of experience. And I want to see if leadership in the Caribbean is different from leadership other places with a cultural spin.
To be quite honest, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, micromanagement shows up. It shows up because sometimes a leader is maybe weak. I say weak in the sense that they don't understand their team just yet. So because they don't understand their team or spend the time to understand what their team can produce, they think they need to have a tight control on them to manage the outcome as best they can. That way they can ensure success and repeated success by that control. But that control works in the reverse. It
Mm.
works in reverse. And it said it creates bottlenecks, create delays, and creates frustration for your team. And then the energy is being spent, being exhausted, fighting those battles when they should be fighting, trying to get the job completed. People don't take pride in something they were micromanaged into doing. They don't take pride. It was somebody else's idea. They just get it done, and they get it done, and they check a box, and they move on. They don't take pride in contributing. They don't see their fingerprints on the outcome because you know what? Somebody else going to do it. And when they know they finished it, they completed it, and they helped get it there. That's a lot. That pride increases, and production goes up, and morale goes up on a construction site. So it doesn't matter really where you are. Micromanagement happens. Um, Maybe a little bit more in the Caribbean, I would say, because that's how we're trained. And know to like, if something goes wrong with the first thing, you do it yourself. That's why we say, go do it yourself. Go do it yourself. Doing it yourself is good, but I say do more than that. Don't do it yourself. Teach, explain why it is you're doing it that way. Because you may be missing something also. But it's
Mhm.
important to have that feedback.
That is so something you said just now, it resonated with me. Teach and explain. That micromanagement aspect is something you find, as you rightly said, throughout the globe. But what would be the difference for someone not being able to impart that knowledge? Is it something ego based? Is it something where, they lack the knowledge? Why would they not be able to impart that knowledge, would you say?
So I would say the culture of an organization has a lot to do with that. The
Mm.
culture. What is rewarded, what is not rewarded. And we can spin off, Judith, into another session and go hours for, because the culture of an organization dictates how people behave. When the currency used in an organization is that control and the optics and need to be seen to be active, micromanagement takes place of that. You
Mm.
know, um, Sometimes when we take knowledge and weaponize it, meaning simply this, and I'll put a simple example. If I am employed in a project and you employed in a project, Judith, and I can operate the photocopier. That's my thing. I got trained on the photocopier, right? So whenever there's photocopy to be done, guess who's doing the photocopy? Me. Because
Correct.
that's I'm safe.
Because that's
That's
your
what I'm
job.
doing because I've been trained. Exactly, that's me. Photocopying is Mikey. And the boss is like, yeah, that's fine. He's doing that, yeah. And the minutes Judith comes and says, hey, how do you do this photocopying? Can you show me? Right away, I'm like, am I going to
Defensive.
lose my
Yeah,
job?
yeah.
What's going on? Are
What
they replacing
happens?
me? What are they doing? So
Yeah.
that needs to change. So the culture needs to change. And say, listen, what we're doing is we're practicing some Japanese I'm thinking here where, you know what, we want everybody in that line to be multi-talented. So today, Mikey doesn't show up for work, Julie can handle it. She may not be able to do it just as good, but we won't be dying that day waiting for a photocopy. And that's that culture needs to happen in an organization and be encouraged.
Again, comes right back. It comes right back, Mikey, to our title, clarity over control. It is so needed. And it is something most leaders need to be, they have to have that, the eye on it. They need to be very focused on that. And I am so glad that you were able to expound on that here today and look at different aspects, different avenues when reality, or rather when the plan meets reality. This is something when most persons want. That's the ideal. That's the ideal, you would agree. But
Correct. Yeah, Leo.
it's not, it's far from. And I'm so glad you were able to, do that for us here today.
And Judith, I would say even more with the evolving construction world and this globe getting smaller and smaller and smaller, there's no longer that ability to manage face to face in person. We now have remote teams. We
Yeah.
now use Zoom. We know you can have a guy in Canada doing your fire alarm systems. You can have a guy in India doing your schedule. You can have a designer in the UK, and all these people. How do you manage those people? So it's about you have to learn to not learn, but to sharpen that skill and hold your skill on the end, because you can't be standing up behind this guy doing the schedule. No, you just got to be able to communicate crisply, quickly, and to the point, because you're managing remote teams and everybody wants your time and they're different time zones. And because we're trying to be competitive, that person that you've hired to do your schedule in India,
Mm-hmm.
he's doing other people also. So you need to make sure when you have him, your time, it's clear. So clarity is even more important when you have remote teams, remote persons, and consultants working for you.
I'm
So
seeing that.
yeah, and so defining destination is clearly saves you time, saves you rework and effort.
Yeah. Is the clarity something also needed when you mentioned earlier when you are managing different when you're managing like beyond geographical borders, other cultures, that clarity, how is that going to be adjusted? Because there's a lot of miscommunication often when we all speak the same language. How is it when culturally, we're doing
Yeah, that's and I found this very strange and it's counterintuitive. Actually, when you have multilingual people on your team, I find communication gets easier. I'll tell you
what?
why, right?
Seriously?
Because we if we're all English speaking, we try to use the big words and the jargons because you know what we want to say. Hey, you know what? I'm a project manager. I'm a senior project manager. I got all these titles behind my name. So using the big words, right? But when you're talking to someone who English is not their first language, guess how you talk? You talk like a baby. You talk in very short sentences and to the point. For instance, today,
Uh-huh.
talking to a guy in Turkey
Yes.
and a guy from Argentina,
Yes.
and maybe English.
Yes.
And the communication was quick, was clear. We used our hands, we pointed, we took up a piece of rock, and because then communication at that point, because we don't speak the same language, it's broken down to its basics, and we're trying to be to the point.
But
No
isn't it
fluff, no
frustrating,
adding on.
Mikey? Isn't it very
It's
frustrating?
and nowadays with Google Translate makes it easier. You just talk and translate.
So you use the
But
tools.
like yes. But I found that when even we speak a little bit English and you can point and you can touch and you can see, it makes it easier. And if you have like Zoom, you can go on, you can click your mouse and you can point and you can say and you can show pictures. So clarity is even more demanded now in the environment we're working because time is of the essence of what we do and you don't have time to replace. That's the one thing I tell my project managers, right? On a project, you have time, you have cost, and you have quality. We can add more money to the project. We can increase the quality, we can decrease quality. The one thing we can't do is add time. The time is the time. Unless the client
Mm.
comes back and you'd say we can add some more time. But time is a resource that's fixed and really and truly, clarity and understand the end is gonna be important for you.
Okay. So if I may, on
Yes.
that aspect of clarity, what does that mean to Mikey, the CEO of Zero Gravity? What does that mean to Mikey, the senior program manager? What does clarity mean to you?
It means, first of all, that I don't BS my team. It needs to be clear in my mind first. So if I'm talking to the client or I'm looking at the drawings, if I cannot picture it in my mind, I have some million questions first to understand. Because if I don't understand, how can I lead my team? So the clarity starts with you. Sometimes, and I have noticed where leaders who are not sure of the end and they just say, yeah, just go do it. When they say just go do it, that's the trigger because it means you're not clear. Like, for instance, we can be talking here and I tell the guy, go bring that for me. And he walks away. You just said bring that. He's thinking and assuming you know what you want, but somebody comes back with the wrong thing. The deer and the headlights look. Pay attention. So first of all, as a CEO and as a senior project manager myself, I need to understand what is required, consume and digest the information. And only when I am sure myself, I then test it. What I do, I just pick up a drawing myself, I go online and I test what I just came up with, my assumptions, because I'm assuming I know what's going on. Or I have a sounding board. I call another project manager or someone who's an expert and say, I did this. Am I right? Am I wrong? Because again, you want to make sure what you put in your mind is what you're going to tell your team. Is that correct? And
Mhm.
then go into your team and explain because you're going to get asked the same questions you may not have asked yourself. So you need to make sure and do that. You need to make sure and clear in your mind before going forward. Have it clear.
So, Mikey, you were mentioning about stakeholder management. What does
Yes.
stakeholder management and how integral is that to having your team being totally in control and being clear, rather?
So the first thing I tell my team is that basically we can't manage our stakeholders. I don't like to use that terminology manage. I said influence and work with. Managing sounds like, no. So for me, the wording and the thinking, I say we influence and we work with our stakeholders. Getting to meet your stakeholders and knowing that the stakeholders are not only the ones who are the client, but the neighbor next to the job site, the school next to you. Those are the people also involved in your project because they're going to be touched by or influenced or affected by the work that you're doing. So it's important that when you're working with the stakeholders, you be transparent, you be honest, and integrity is built. Integrity is very difficult to build when it's gone. It's like a dam. Once it starts going over the top and starts
That's
eroding,
it.
it's
That's
difficult
it.
to bring it back.
That's
And
it.
once it goes, you don't have, it's going to be tough to recover a project like that because then it becomes, I don't trust you. I don't trust what you say. So if you're not sure, nothing's wrong with raising your hand and saying, I'm not sure. Give me a day, give me an hour, let me get back to you. Don't resist the hesitation to be the yes person and to tell your client what they want to hear. They prefer you tell them as it is, but not just go with the problem. Go with solutions 1, 2, and 3, and what your recommendations are. I found to work very well for me when I go. Not just say there's a fire. Hey, there's a fire. We got the extinguisher. We took care of it. This is what we're gonna do. Just don't go with the problem. No one likes somebody come with a problem. So I
But be
say, go
solution
with the problem.
oriented. I agree.
Correct, correct. And you know so that's important for managing your stakeholders and the people that you are reporting to or you're accountable to. And transparency is very important. While I understand being a contractor, of course, we not 100%, because we need to protect our numbers, we need to protect our what we're doing. Some of it may be proprietary work we're doing. Our numbers are what we built up over the years. So, yes, but understand that when you're talking to your client or your owner, be transparent. You have a problem, mention up front, because you know what? Reality will expose you. Nothing can be hidden on a construction site or any project you're doing forever. It's gonna come up. It's gonna show its face. And then you lose face and you lose character, you lose integrity, and that's you can't recover from that. It's difficult to recover from that.
That's
Very
something
difficult.
very hard to gain and to get back.
Right. I have been in situations where, I've been yelled at by clients. But you know what? When it was all said and done, shook our hand and said, I appreciate your honesty.
Right.
I know where I stand because they also have to answer somebody else. Also, and knowing where they are is important. And that's your responsibility as a project manager, as a senior person, as a leader on
As
a
a
project
leader, that's
to,
important.
to make sure that you are being transparent and honest. And if you can't say it, then don't say it. Say, I cannot answer that. At this point, I don't have the authority to do it and defer, you know? So, and this is where we talk about what you said, where plan meets reality, right? And that's a hard truth in leadership, right? Is when uncertainty rises, many leaders reach for that control. And that's all we innately want to do, right? We talked about that. But what is actually needed is more clarity, understanding why we got here. And in the Caribbean, as we mentioned, you have shifting goalposts, you have competing needs. Because if to be honest, if I had everything I need on a project, it might be better. But I can't have everything I need, because we have other projects taking place and resources are limited. So the conversation has to really be for strong leaders to determine and always be clear on the outcome and be able to adapt. Understand that the client and the end user can change and forget the micromanaging. There are times you have to manage a single process, agreed, but it can't be everything. And don't abandon discipline. I'm not saying to throw it to the wolves. I'm not saying to replace control. I'm saying remove unnecessary control. Unburden your team. Be that shepherd over your flock. Understand. Let them know the boundaries where they can stay. Let them know where the wolves are. Listen to when the wolves are coming. And demand accountability for results. And accountability for results mean if it goes bad, they explain. If it goes good, yeah. But always cheer on the effort. Effort is important.
But Mikey, I found, and would you say that in the Caribbean there tends to be more of a do as I say and not as I do. Sort
That
of
used to that used to be the way, but this new
used to
generation,
be
I said new generation, this Gen Z and Gen
millennials.
Y, different, yes. They don't accept that, and that has caused and needs to be understood by our leadership, by the older guys like myself, that what worked 10 years ago will not necessarily work again this time around because we have a more informed workforce, a more at liberty, and the world has gotten smaller. So the tools you've used 10 years ago, you gotta change that up, hundred
Again,
percent.
that is the clarity that you were stressing and emphasizing. Well, we looked and touched on cultural differences, and now you've looked and brought to the fore a sort of an age gap where you have that clarity that needs to be that needs to exist totally. Because if someone says, okay, for example, if you are talking to someone on the site and you give an instruction and they said, bet, would you be able to understand what that meant or what what were they trying to say? And again, that's a different age group more or less communicating to you and saying in their terms and in their way, okay, I'll do it.
Right. So I think of so being in construction all this time, I take a step back to that leadership. And the instructions already been given by the client. That's in the contract drawing and specifications. So when we go out on site there, it's more about the process to get to the end. So I may say, and I really seldom give clear, defined paths to follow to the end. I do like I just said. I just say, we need to get, for instance, the roof painted and finished with the caps on by Friday because we have other stuff coming. So that's the deadline we cannot miss. And I leave it there. And then I ask them that question: what needs to happen or be in place for us to achieve that goal? And then brainstorm quickly. And we all agree what has to happen, who has to be there, and I walk away and let that settle and decide for themselves. And I monitor to see what's going on, what's happening. So if I have to go step in, hey, what happened? What's going on? I intervene only then. So it's not about giving instruction. It's more about, hey, where do we need to be on Friday or 2 months from today? And the reasoning for that. The
Mhm.
reason is more important than
Stress on the
anything else because
clarity, the
if it's just
communication.
because, yes, it can't be ego. This is the reasons why, guy. And you know what? When this is done, you can come grab me and I explain the nuances of why. But for now, let's just get this out the way. And be prepared for pushback. And the pushback I welcome because again, there may be a better way, an easier way that I have missed or we have missed for years. Not because we did it this way all the time, means the right way. And the young guy may have a better idea. So you want that feedback. So what's the goal, guys? How do we get there? Tools, methods, techniques. What do you guys think? Can it work? What can we do differently? If we can't, this is what we're going to do. And understand too, even in the process, we make a change, but we're
Mhm.
all aware of that change.
But time is money, Mikey. Even if you have one team member that comes to you with a recommendation, there may be 10. Time is money. We can't listen to all 10, can we?
We can't listen to all 10, and that's why it takes team building, right? So these guys that come to you, it's very important to understand your team, what they give, and need to understand you also.
As a
Need to
leader.
understand you as the leader. Because you being in the room or not being in the room should have the same results with your guys. I say always strive for cooperation, not compliance. And the difference and the nuance for me is very simple when I tell guys. Compliance is if you're standing there, the guys are going to work. You're not there, they don't work. So having cooperation is important. When you have cooperation on a project team and team working together, whether you are there or not, it's as if you're there and they're going to work just as hard, if not harder.
Mm.
So understand your team, what they give, and the questions are coming and invite the questions, but then, have a avenue for that. Hey, send me an email later. I can explain to you. And so you manage your time. You're right. We just can't stop for 10 guys. Guys, you already said, I have a deadline. I have a time to meet. Well, how do we get there? And you got questions? Give them an avenue. A simple email to you, a note to you, a question when you have some time. Make time for your team. Make time for your team because you have to listen to the feedback. Feedback is the elixir of the gods, I say, as a project manager, as a leader. I welcome it. I really do. And sometimes it comes in a form that I don't like, but I listen, right? I'll give you a clear example. Um, Maybe a week ago, I got an email from a subordinate, and it was Some might say it was disrespectful, but I always say sometimes the most tastiest treats come in a brown bag. So,
So true.
the most tastiest sweets come in a brown bag. So open the brown bag, enjoy the fruit. And you know what? I saw him today, and we're past that. I don't get hung up in that communication because I communicate very well. I think you communicate very well. And that's the way they communicate. Wrong, right, and different. Now, I'm going to work with him to finesse that. Because while I may be as forgiving, the next leader may not be and be bad because he had a good idea. So I need to work with that person. So then again, my radar goes up. I take a note. I'm going to work with this guy. Simple.
That is excellent because in effect, you are mentoring leaders. You are showing persons what's the best route or the best way, the best method in having your team be malleable, flexible, going along a route where we're not just basically do as I say, as I mentioned before, and not as I do, but you are doing something that would benefit us all. Yes.
Correct.
So you mentioned before you would have had an incident or something that wasn't too favorable. Were there any sort of unfavorable instances on clarity?
Oh, those discussions happen all the time. Trust me. This is construction, and even outside of construction, right? Clarity sometimes can be different things depending on what you're looking at and how you're looking at it and the lenses you're using. Because, for instance, if I am an electrician and there's a carpenter, there's a mason looking at the schedule, they are looking at it at different lenses altogether because they're concerned with their biases. And as a leader and a leadership role, you have to understand that bias and hear what they're saying and how to put that together. So yes, clarity is not the same for all of us. We're going to see clarity the way we want to see it and the way we're trained with the lenses we're using. As a leader, you have to have multiple lenses,
So
understand what's
true.
being said, and go from there. 100%. 100%. So clarity is not vague inspiration. I'm not talking about this is not the la la thing. No, it's being precise about the required outcome, the standard to be met, the deadline of the constraint, the risks that cannot be ignored, and who has the authority to decide and at one level. And that's what gives people confidence to move. If your team has that, they know, hey, I can cash this check to this point. Other than that, need to make a phone call. And allowing your team to make small failures pays dividends later on.
How
Um,
so?
it, so I had a young team, a group of engineers,
Right?
fresh out of college. And when they hear this podcast, they know who they are because they're gonna be laughing like mad. So we're doing a concrete mix for a project, and we got the mix design from a specialist, right? So he had the mix design done, and I said, guys, we got the mix design. What are we gonna do now? Well, we're gonna go to site and give it to the batch plant operator, and he put it in the machine, and we will, start mixing concrete. I said, great, but who's checking that? We're assuming he's correct, right? Let's just make sure. Let's do a trial mix. Let's do a trial mix first, yeah. Oh, yeah, we could. Yeah, we could. That's a good idea. Let's do a trial mix. Absolutely. So we had a mixer on the site, one of those little mixers you see turning, mixing concrete.
Yes.
So I said, okay, you have all the resources you need. Go ahead and do the mix design. But let me know what you're going to do. Let me see what you're doing, right? So they send me back an email. This is what we're going to do. This is the quantities, A, B, C, D. And what they're going to do. I said, I almost tempted to stop if I didn't say. I said, no, Mikey, let him go. So I let him go. So they go down to the site. They bring the guys in, the machinery and the equipment and the materials, and they start, right? So this is the mixer. They add the water.
Uh-huh.
They add the cement, and they add in the sand, and it starts overflowing.
Wow.
And I'm like, so I stand right. I'm like, I said, lesson learned, right, guys? And they're like, yeah, because the mixer can only take 0.7 cubic yards.
So much.
They made a batch design for 1 meter cube. It couldn't fit in there. So I said, guys, lesson learned, right? Always pay attention, assume nothing, and confirm. So again, small failure, but they would never forget that lesson. Feel verified. The first M in my 7M is measure. And that's a lesson that I allow them to fail within reason, but it's a lesson they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. And they're going to be paying off dividends later on. May not be to me or my project, but to other projects they're working with.
Mikey, thank you so very much for that very, very intriguing story and that critical message that you imparted on us.
Thank you again for this timely podcast. I think it's important for the region, as a people, as PMISCC, as we move forward, for helping our people, go forward with leadership. understanding the difference between being a manager and leadership, and tell them that they're not in a silo, not by themselves, not in a vacuum. They can reach out to PMICC, reach out to you, myself, and other members of the team. We're more than helpful, more than willing to help. Just reach out. There are lots of ways you can reach out. The website, PMICC website, go there, click on the links, reach out. Because you know what? You never can tell. You may be in a spot, and you think to yourself, I got nowhere else to this, and you'd be surprised. One conversation, a sounding board, just get some advice. Sometimes we just need somebody to listen and listen with the lens because they've traveled that road. And it makes it even more authentic. So yeah, don't sit in quietly. Reach out, ask for help, say something. Just put your hand up. We will respond. We'll definitely respond. You got questions, you can put in the comments, and we will respond to your comments. I will make an effort to respond to your questions in the comments below in this podcast. So please do that. So
Mikey, thank you so very much for being our guest in this initial podcast. And it is so the topic, your discussion, and your advice and your expertise has been extremely, very, very thought-provoking and provocative, I would say. I want to wish and thank all of our viewers, all of our project professionals, with PMI, SEC, and other chapters who are here with us. I want to look and tell you thank you for being a part of this initial official podcast of the Project Management Institute of the Southern Caribbean chapter. As well, if you have any other queries, if you'd like to hear more from us, feel free to link us on other podcast platforms to hear more from us, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more content like this. Thank you so very much again, Mikey, and thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I appreciate the opportunity, and let's get after it.